in the middle too. We can keep it very fluid, but I can go ahead and get started. And then here, I'll go ahead and share my screen really quick just to do a test. Make sure it's all working. Let's see. Can everyone see my screen? Yes. Okay, awesome. Okay, so today we are talking about strategic SEO, and one of the things that we do at MLD is go a lot back to intention. So Mountain Laurel Digital is a long name, so we call ourselves MLD pretty often. But just some background on the name, Mountain Laurel is a native plant to Western North Carolina. And so the agency was started in Asheville, and so that's a lot of a nod to our roots, just to give you some background on our name. But I think what we usually like to start with when talking about SEO is kind of going back to why it's important, because SEO can kind of feel a bit elusive and can kind of be a black box of doing a lot of different things and not really knowing why we're doing all the things that we're trying to do. So when looking at the website, kind of looking at why SEO is important and why it's important to have intention and strategy behind SEO. So some of the reasons why it's so important, I think most people are familiar with the SERP, which is the search engine results page. So anything that's coming up on the first page of Google or Bing. And we're going to talk a little bit about generative AI as well. But essentially, it's very competitive, as everyone knows, when you're searching for your business and trying to find your website for specific terms that are either your services or products. And now the search engine results page has changed a lot, especially in the past year and a half, in regards to having responses to search queries that are more chatbot like. So there's something called knowledge panels, which is like on the far right side, essentially answers to questions that are stagnant, similar to Wikipedia. And then there's featured snippets, which we'll talk about today and what those are. But essentially, these are things that stay at the top of the search results, and something that our team has been focusing on a lot. Because with generative AI and all the changes happening to the search results page, we're trying to rank more for more stagnant search results versus links. Obviously, there's Google Maps, and there's images, and there's videos. For news, there's top stories, and then there's also the carousel that comes up usually for products or for brick and mortars. And then there's something called PAA, which is People Also Ask, which is a section you've probably seen pretty frequently in your search results, which is a section that's People Also Ask, and it's right underneath the first results. And it's basically like all the trending questions. And there's usually 4 in a pack. And so that's something else we're trying to optimize your website for. It's usually long form content like a blog or a page that has a lot more content on it than a homepage that's answering a specific question within your subject matter. So we'll talk a little bit about how to rank for those too. One of the things that I'm noting here is organic search delivers about 53%. That's a recent statistic I pulled of all traffic. So pretty important to come up on the first page of Google, since organic search is still one of the primary channels driving traffic to the web, anybody's website at this point. Also, leaning into the sustainable piece of like why I built our agency. Most agencies are pretty hectic, and I would say we are busy, but I think one thing that we try to do is keep it sustainable. So it kind of is in line with similar to SEO, and I think why I'm so passionate about SEO too is that it's something that if you do well and strategic with intention, it is very sustainable. And so once you get up in those first page rankings, you can see consistent growth for your traffic, and you don't have to constantly. I mean, PPC is amazing too. It's a totally different animal, but it's nice in that way that SEO is sustainable. So what is SEO? Just going back to the basics, making sure we're all on the same page. Search engine optimization is the process of advancing your website to increase visibility. So the areas that most people are searching is products, services, and then information on topics. So media, questions that are related to your products or services that you want to come up for. And essentially the goal of SEO is just to get more visitors and also increase the quality of your visitors to the website. So with intentional SEO and website work, the big acronym and one of the big debates right now in the SEO community is that EEAT is not a ranking signal. It definitely is not. It is, sometimes it gets called that. I wouldn't say it's a signal for Google. It's more of kind of a framework that and a formula that SEOs and technical marketers are using to kind of find a way to see the differences in the algorithms that have come up the past year and a half. The newest one is experience. So it used to be expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness, and experience got added last year to this formula. And that speaks more to like your company having direct experience in what you're talking about, not necessarily talking in first person, but it's clear to the search engines that your website, your company has experience to the subject matter, not just expertise. And a lot of times what we've been doing to kind of highlight that is case studies. So more content around the actual work. So less blog heavy, blog's still important, but I think leaning more into experience is something we've been focusing a lot on for websites. It also implies that this trend also implies that Google rewards pages where the author has actually done the topic. So essentially the author of that particular article, especially if you're in like B2B business, looking at the consultative lens of like if you're consulting on something, you have direct experience on that the consult that you're doing within that content. So I kind of broke down some of the other things that we look at when we're building out strategic SEO plans for a website. So demonstrating through your website's design and content quality of the answers. So not only having the content reflect it, but also the design. So we've been doing a lot of like growth-driven design strategies with websites where we're looking at a home page and essentially like the audience is all mobile, or it's like 60% of the visitors are mobile, and say there's a lot of content on the site that's not reflective of like getting the visitor to a phone number, or it's not reflective of answering their questions quickly. Those are kind of the things that we try to design for, not only rewrite, but also design the page so that it's more mobile friendly, or it gets quicker to certain content. So content hierarchy, like what's at the top of the page versus the bottom of the page, things like that, that you can apply to not only the content layout, but also the design. And then becoming an authority on a topic. So I think it's marketers have a tendency, and business owners in general have a tendency to want to talk about topics that are within the subject matter, but maybe not directly tied to what you do. So what we do is something called content ideation and research around what people are searching, and then trying to become an authority on what is already being searched versus trying to go after topics that are not coming up in search results. And how we do that is essentially like manually looking at people also ask questions, and then taking those questions and figuring out how to integrate them into our long form content. And long form content, so if you're writing a blog, a homepage, or a service page, one of the things that we've seen help a lot with SEO work is looking at the H1 or header, also known as the title of the content, and seeing if there is a way to integrate the question that you're seeing being asked regularly into the title, because that is a very big signal for Google to potentially populate your link for that question. Also H2s, so like any subheaders, and then anything pretty much, at the top of the page is going to get seen sooner. But also kind of looking at interlinking strategies. So a lot of the work we do is interlinking other pages. So if you're on a contact page, linking back to the service page so they can easily go back and read. I think, and really what all of this is with Google's trends right now is rewarding pages that help people make decisions quicker, and also are engaged. So like if the goal of the website is that you want them to stay on a certain page for a long time and read, What does that look like as far as user experience? If the goal of the page is for them to click on it and call the number, then what is the design supposed to look like? I think this a lot goes back to UX, user experience, and it all plays into SEO. And then refurbishing content. So this is something that I think is low-hanging fruit for a lot of website management, people managing their website essentially, is they see content that's ranking and getting a lot of traffic, and then they try to write another blog like that blog. But really what we've seen work better is taking that existing blog and refurbishing it, because that existing link already has that historical relationship with Google. You can take that data from that blog and, write other blogs or other pieces of content on the website. But if there's a page on the site that's getting a lot of traffic and a lot of engagement, we actually try to refurbish blogs every quarter and go back and see like what else can we do to get them to rank more or get a featured snippet. So this goes into generative AI. This is in beta still. You can download the app. It's called Gemini, is the app right now on your phone. And you can also join like the testing lab to see how this would play out on for you on a daily basis. But this is just a snapshot of the recent Google products in search that launched last quarter. And essentially you can see it's very different than what we get right now, but essentially it's features within search that give you the option. Right now you have to select the generative experience, but essentially it looks more and more like a chatbot. Obviously Gemini is separate, it's the AI chatbot, but if you download it, I noticed that if I downloaded it, I immediately was able to test also this feature in the search. So this this definitely impacts media the most. So what we've done with looking at media articles is something called structured data, and that's more of like marking up the back of the page. So it's a bit more technical, but marking up certain parts of articles to help them rank better. And then also like looking at ones that are already ranking really well and figuring out ways to use them for a featured snippet like this. So this is an example of a featured snippet. Essentially Google has, rewarded this link with a featured snippet because it felt like it answered this question the best. And so that's ultimately the goal. In order to earn a featured snippet, you have to create the best answer. And there's a lot of things that go into being the best answer. It's not just the best content, it's, also being the easiest user experience, and that plays into speed, like how fast is the site, and it also plays into links. So potentially like this is a .ca website. So like if you have, most likely you're going to see a lot of .gov, .edus potentially coming up. But if you have links to other like PR related websites, you have a higher chance of getting a featured snippet. But again, it does go back to the best content, I would say, in our experience. And these are some ways to kind of optimize the content on your website. So titles I've talked about already, but essentially like targeting the audiences. So that's where the intention comes in when you're doing keyword research for topics to write about, to generate more traffic organically, or how you're positioning service pages or product pages. E-commerce is a little different. I'm not speaking to e-commerce today. There's a lot of different types of SEO, by the way. There's international SEO, there's e-commerce SEO, there's semantics SEO. There's all sorts of different, ways to prioritize your SEO. So today I mostly focused on like a standard brochure website. So not doing like transactions. E-commerce would be probably a different strategy. This is more focused on a content focused website. But so content infrastructure, looking at, how the website is built. A lot of times we find that content pages aren't even like they're not formatted right. They don't have H1s, they don't have H2s. They're just like copy. So that's an easy, formatting edit, just to go in and make titles and make them formatted to H1s and subtitles. Yeah. And then this is kind of a breakdown of keywords. So a lot of people ask us about how do you choose keywords. So I found this diagram from a recent article from SEO Clarity. And essentially what this kind of shows is like you have the single word phrases, the 2 to 3 word phrases, and then the 4+ word phrases. And I think it's really helpful to see, like, of course, the single words are very competitive, and then it gets less competitive the more words you add to it. And the reason they're competitive because you have a lot of competitors going after the same words because they have a lot of traffic, or they have a lot of searches generating a lot of traffic. So in looking at this, the way we try to look at it is essentially looking at the audiences. So if you have, a B2B business and you're targeting, internal managers around operations for, maybe a software or something like that, looking at the solutions that you're trying to solve for those managers is a great way to kind of start the intent of the keyword research. Also looking at competitors, any kind of direct competitors and what terms they're targeting, or how the language that they're using when they talk about their products. But I think it goes back to language, because one of the things that we've been studying a lot of is natural language processing. So this is another example of generative AI experiments happening in search. And so this goes back to natural language processing. At the best example, they're not at all alike in regards to robotics. So I just want to preface that, but to me, it's very similar to Alexa or like a Google Assistant, where like you're doing a voice search, and that's kind of this is a chatbot search behavior basically. So when you're looking at these kind of searches, you're seeing like they're longer, and so there's more qualifying things happening to the query, which is great from the quality of the traffic. So even though there may be less people coming to the site for a longer phrase, you're going to have a higher quality of traffic. So that's what I wanted to point out. So when we're looking at SGE, so these are some of the top big updates this year so far. It's basically changing daily, so it's hard to keep up right now. But I put in the links here so everybody can click on it. But this is the lab for what they're calling SGE, Search Generative Experience. So you can kind of see what that experience is like. You will have to sign up through your personal Gmail. You can't do it through your work email. But you can start to see in your Google browser what that's like. And then I put a few more blogs in here around natural language processing. And then there's large language processing too, but that doesn't impact search as much. But natural language processing, when you think about it from like an Alexa perspective, you're thinking about like, okay, well, they're already in this contextual lens of why they're there and why they're searching. And it's just way more granular than it used to be. That's why keywords don't work anymore. Keywords have actually been not a part of like really SEO for many years now. It's just one of those metrics that we just track because it's understood, I think, by website managers and business owners and marketing teams. But really what we try to track more is traffic and quality of traffic, because keywords are really not what drive quality traffic. It just helps us see like where the presence is at. It's more of these longer terms and like identifying what those longer terms are, and then the intent behind the search and coming up for that intent. Product searches, one of the things that's happening with product, as you can imagine, with generative AI, there's also these trends of buying within the search results. So more and more of the updates are showcasing the act of essentially doing everything you would do on a website within the search results, particularly with products. So we're seeing that with a lot of our clients where if you have a blog that's coming up really high for a product search, it's going to get pushed down because Google is prioritizing product listings over content so that people can just buy right in the search results, or as fast as possible, essentially. So that makes it more challenging, I think, for website managers to manage when traffic is going up, because more than likely people are buying right in the search results. So that's something fun for marketers to start figuring out how we track. But I wouldn't say that's impacted a ton of our clients. I would say it's just one of those things that we have already been trying to do, is to rank for other longer queries. But if you have a short query that's product focused, more than likely it's just going to be the product or the carousel. That's not going to be a blog. So that's why those longer questions are great if you can come up number one above the product searches. Another signal that we've been focusing on, that we've already talked about, is, we call it brand equity, but it's that experience. And what we've seen help the most with experience is link earning. And so having relationships with entities like local magazine, local publications, local universities, having any kind of relationship with entities that have a lot of historical relationships with the search engines goes a really long way. So one of the things that we've kind of leaned into with all the change has been time for creativity, essentially. And so looking for opportunities for new ideas. So some of the things that we've leaned into with SGE has been, new content opportunities with FAQs. So this changed recently, about 7 months ago. Frequently asked questions was like a big way for SEO to come up in the search results, where you would work on your FAQs on your site, and then those frequently asked questions you could mark up and they'd come up on the first page for those questions around your business. Google has been not as receptive, I think, to that strategy. Over the past 6 or 7 months, they've kind of put out an announcement that that's not, I think they just got overutilized by SEOs. And so Google is like, no, we can't do that anymore. So now what we've been doing is looking at more ways to take FAQs and put them more into blogs, because really the trend is about, instead of taking quick fixes, like optimizing an FAQ page, which is not very hard. Google's now making you find other ways of being the best content, and coming up on the first page as the best option for that search, versus taking advantage of quick things that you can optimize. So that's just something to know. That's changed recently, because I used to recommend that a lot. But video and image optimization is still very much a thing. So with video, we do a lot of optimizations on YouTube channels. We've noticed that if you go into each YouTube video and optimize for terms that people are searching, and also do something else, structured data, which is a markup on the code of the video, that helps Google find the video faster. The video can actually come up on the search page too. So just getting creative with other things like video and images, and then collaborating with other channels. So we use a tool called Hotjar, and Hotjar is basically a software that you can put on your site to track how people are interacting with the page, and it actually creates a heat map. Because I've spoken a lot about user experience being a big part of how web pages are ranked. And so with that tool, you can actually collect user data on how people are using the design, and maybe roadblocks or things that are not working well, in the navigation, or maybe they're stalled out on certain pages. And so that's a great tool to kind of gather data to improve user experience. And then when that user experience is improved, you also see changes in how it's performing in the search results. Thank you. Let's see. And then as far as paid and content, obviously all those things kind of work together in a digital marketing ecosystem. But I would say kind of leaning into making sure they're all working together and have a similar message is what goes into that brand credibility as well. And then studying the chatbots. So that's why I've talked more about generative AI. It's not necessarily because I'm working with chatbots, but it's more I'm studying chatbots, because I think that the behavior in chatbots is the future of search engines. So it's important for us to understand them, as well as natural language processing, and how those how those answers are chosen through those other technologies. I'm going to take a pause and just see if we have questions. I know I've talked a while. Happy to go back to slides too.
I've got one.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I think we lost you, John.
okay, how about that?
We can hear you now.
Okay, cool. I think my wireless headphones decided to charge up and took day. Okay, anyway, my name's John. I own House of Swank here in town. We do t-shirts and clothes and stickers, all kind of stuff, all North Carolina and Raleigh, blah blah blah. Awesome. We're getting ready. We're 14 years in or 12, some big audio number. We're getting ready to rebuild the website again because I hate my life, and I have a couple of questions.
Yeah,
we have a ton of old product that we have on and old blogs and that kind of stuff. Are we better off? I basically want to clean up the site, get rid of like a third of my products. Am I better off keeping those products on site, even though from the analytics they're not getting hits at all? Or am I better off just killing it off and creating a good like four page with a search bar and saying, oh, my bad, look for other stuff?
Yeah, I think typically our recommendation is 301 redirects. But I don't know how many products you have. So yeah, what we typically do when we're doing some kind of like product migration, which sounds like you're just kind of sunsetting a lot of products, is we put together a 301 redirect map, just because you don't want too many 404s in the search engines, or right, you could get flagged with like, having broken pages everywhere. So I would recommend doing like a 301 redirect map to start. And then once the new site, like once all those products have like kind of been off the site for a while, you can usually remove the redirects and let them 404 naturally. But that's what we typically do when there's a large, product list.
So basically this stuff that hasn't been touched in like any activity in 8 months, 10 months, a year, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Am I in any kind of real danger, but just deleting those products altogether and just saying,
as long as they don't have any traffic, then no.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Like I want to basically take like my bottom 20% of the traffic that's getting absolutely nothing and just get rid of it.
Yeah.
Basically our site's pretty quick as it is. And actually my second question is, we're going to move to a different theme on Shopify. Mm-hmm. Are you seeing any speed differences by having a plain white background or something with like other colors in the backing thing? Does that matter at all?
Oh yeah. Gosh, that really depends on the code.
Right.
It's dependent on how it's coded, so it would be dependent on the theme.
Right.
But typically speed is impacted by image size,
right,
and movement. So that's the trend these days with like moving stuff around on home pages and having a lot of movement has been fun to navigate lately. But it sounds like if it's just color, I can't imagine it impacting speed, but I'd have to go back to the theme and see how it was coded.
Yeah, we've gone back and like basically alt tagged every image from now to here, there, and shrink those image sizes and that kind of stuff. And that seemed like it's really helped a lot. And just getting rid of like just garbage applications that just aren't really doing anything.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, all right, that's all I got for now.
Yeah, cool. Well, that's exciting. It's always nice to have a refresh.
Yeah, I mean this time of year is always really slow, so it's like kind of a panicky. Like as long as I'm doing something, we're not going to lose the house. So yeah.
Yeah, that'll keep you busy.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? I guess back to I didn't know if anyone had any questions about this, if it was new for everyone, um, or if everyone's heard about it yet.
Yeah, we've talked about it briefly here. I've heard about it, but I've never spent time, I haven't downloaded it yet or anything to mess around with it. So that'll be interesting to go see kind of what we could do with that possibly.
What was that again? I didn't catch what you were saying.
Yeah, the search generative experience. Because if you have a product site, it could impact your listings, your product listing.
We have a quick question in the chat from Margaret. She asked, how frequently do you recommend posting blogs?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Well, typically we like to see 2 to 3 a month. And it doesn't have to be a blog because Google's typically looking for, updates to the site that's basically informing users and keeping them up to date with things that are changing. So it could be a service page or, it could be any content. It doesn't have to be a blog. I use the word blog lightly too, because, it could be resources, it could be white paper, anything really is what Google's kind of looking for the whole site. As far as like keeping up to date with, competitors, we like to look at our competitors for our clients and seeing how much they're posting because it's also relative to the marketplace. So I do recommend looking at competitors and seeing like if they're ranking really well, how often are they blogging? Because we do have some clients that have to blog even more than that because of the state of their competition. I would say like creating new pages. No, I would actually say that Google, like I said earlier, it's essentially more pages that have been on the site for a long time if you're updating them. Obviously with a grain of salt, don't update them too often, but I would say Google knows those URLs already, and so they have more authority. So adding new pages is going to take longer. Like, so a good example, we have several clients that do like have lots of locations, and this is kind of again, take this with a grain of salt because it's very dependent on the marketplace. But we've seen other ways of doing content outside of just blogs, but location pages. This is pretty old school, and I will say like you still have to be careful of duplicate content. But I think like location pages are also something that you can do, whether it's like, focusing on different locations that you serve or doing a blog about a certain area that you want to come up in. Make a case study, for instance, is a great example too. Case studies, location pages, articles, blogs. I mean, these are all essentially, new content or pages that already exist that need to get updated. I see questions in the chat, but I can't see them while we're.
Let me see. Paul asked, does social media and SEO have any correlation? Like the more followers
Yes.
on platform Y equals better SEO?
Oh, that's a great question. No, not the follower count. Or we haven't seen any correlation to follower count. I would say social media is a part of the ecosystem of driving more traffic to the site. So brand equity. So like if you're doing an influencer campaign, essentially you have more brand awareness. And so Google's going to see that and recognize that the brand is more credible. So it's not necessarily that you have more followers, but more the social media channels are driving credible traffic to your site and then building awareness through other sites. So influencer campaign is where we normally see it. Like we do influencer campaigns and partner with other companies that do influencer campaigns, and we usually see direct impact with organic traffic from influencer campaigns. Okay. Any other questions?
Think you're good for now.
Okay. Well, the only other thing I didn't talk too much about was structured data. So there's a site called schema.org. If you could put that in the chat. Schema.org is essentially a website where you can create markup, and it's basically formula codes that you can create. And then in them, you can highlight certain words or callouts that you want. So there's different types of schema markup. And this is a great tool for when you're working to get featured snippets because it helps Google essentially quickly find that information on the page. And also, a lot of competition isn't going to have schema markup. So, for instance, for like a product website, you can mark up each product page with specific descriptions, and you're more likely to rank for those. So that's more of a technical code piece, but it's an easy like snippet of code that schema.org actually helps you create. And then there's a lot of tools out there too that you can help you create the markup. But schema markup is a great tool for working towards getting to a featured snippet. And also going back to the keyword research, looking at questions that people are asking, and how to kind of integrate that markup to answer those questions is a great way to do it too.
We did have another question come in. They were asking, should we change URLs to better use keywords or just leave them alone?
Oh, that's a good question. So for URLs, I would say it's more about organization. So every site has a sitemap, like a folder structure of homepage, the main navigation, and then it has subpages underneath. So if you have about, and then you usually have like a team page, a story page. What we typically find an issue with SEO audits is actually just really messy URLs. I think it's more about having clean URLs than it is about having keywords in the URLs. I will say I've seen it be helpful if you have like a targeted location and you have like a location. So you have an office maybe that you want to have more content about, or a store, and you want people to find it easier, having like the name of where it's located. So like location Raleigh, say you have multiple locations, and having like the city name in the URL does help. But I think it's more about being clean and about being contextually accurate to the content than it is about having keywords in the URL. And that's kind of how we approach URL audits. I think blogs are typically where we see the messiest URLs, because a lot of times what we call the slug, I know when you update content on the back of the site, it'll call it a slug, which is like the kind of the vanity URL that you set up. And I think a lot of times it's just like checking that URL to make sure that it matches the title of the blog and just didn't default to like a bunch of words from the blog. That's something we see a lot of. But yeah, clean URLs, I wouldn't worry too much about keywords though. More about like that it matches the content. I will say with products, it does seem to help more. Like we work on an e-commerce site and it has the product folder, and then it says, in the ideally the title of the product has a term in it, but if it doesn't, then that would make more sense to have a keyword in the products. But on like a general URL structure, it doesn't typically matter, but I have seen it work well in an e-commerce setting. Were there any questions about keyword research? I know we're not really supposed to target keywords anymore. It's more intent, but that's kind of a starting place.
How about one more question?
Cool.
Super easy. Okay, so if you had to have the next half step for someone to do to have the most impact on their SEO, the one tiny thing, what would that be?
I like how you preface this is the easy question. Because any technology person would say it's dependent on this. I mean, I feel like for SEO to make a difference, I mean, the first thing you would have to know is who you're talking to. Like if you haven't done any audience research, SEO will make no difference. But most people do that. If you've already done audience research, I would say it's just a lot of research. That's what I keep thinking. I keep going back to, like, if you have to do audience research and keyword research before you can do any kind of implementation. So assuming all of that is done, the first thing you would do is metadata. I would say title tags and meta descriptions, just because that's probably the fastest, easiest thing to tackle first, instead of having defaulted title tags. But having like targeted, sequence of terms that you see being trending in the search, like people are asking these questions over and over, and your titles don't have anything in them in the title tags. That'd be the first thing I would do. Oh, actually, a lot of people come to us with sites with crawl issues, so that's worse. If you haven't submitted your website to Google Search Console, that would be your first thing. Sorry. That would be really important. Make sure Google can find your website first before title text. Question. Well, cool. Well, that's all I had. Did you want to cover anything else? Any other questions?
There's one question that just popped in that said Google Search Console.
Oh, okay. Google, so it used to be called Google Webmaster Tools. But if you Google Search Console, it's a free Google tool that you submit your sitemap to, and it helps Google find your website. You don't have to have it set up for Google to find your website, but it makes it so much easier. And you can also manage the health of your website. But it's a code that you can put on anything. Squarespace has, I think, a plugin for you just have to add the ID code in Squarespace, and Shopify, you put it in the header. And then WordPress also, I think, has like an implementation where you can put it in. But Google Search Console is, I like to call it the health monitor. But it just lets you know, like, if you have malware or if Google can't crawl your site, because a lot of times there's development issues on a website that we're not aware of. And you can do all of these on-site SEO like content and all these marketing things, but if there's a development error, then it's kind of all mute. So Google Search Console actually will tell you if you have 4 pages, just automatically just submitting the site to it. Yeah, and it has a dashboard. It's all